This week's show brought to you by future gold medalist Harrison Barnes. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I am your host, Dre Alvarez. Hopefully, you're not overloaded on Boxscore Geeks goodness, as we did 2 shows last week, and one was already released this week. Anyway, I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers, and with me, as always, is our producer, our voice of God, our Harrison Barnes #1 fan, Brian Foster, aka Boxscore Brian on Twitter. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, boy, that Harrison Barnes, what a player. What a player.
All right, so basically we've, like I said, there's a bunch of kind of free agency stuff to talk. I'm actually quite excited. I think me and Brian have slightly different kind of opinions on the offseason. I'm quite excited because this is like the last time it's kind of fun in the NBA for a while. It's where there's a bunch of speculation on what could happen, and much like television shows, like we're going to talk Game of Thrones, and one of the things about Game of Thrones this year was the weeks between shows for me were oftentimes a lot more exciting than the shows themselves, because you have these clever, intelligent people on the internet coming up with great theories about, oh, what could really happen is, Arya could have been replaced by Jaqen, and then she gets stabbed. And, if you're not caught up on Game of Thrones, I'm sorry. I'm very confused why you're listening to this podcast that's been discussing Game of Thrones like spoilerific the last 4 weeks. Just in the blue. But anyway, so, all these great theories about Game of Thrones, and then we see the actual episodes, it's not as good. The NBA offseason to me is very much the same way. At the start of the offseason, we have things like, oh my God, Kevin Durant's going to go to the Warriors, and the Warriors have enough cap space they can trade Andre Iguodala for Nicholas Batum, and then also upgrade this other guy, and it's going to be amazing, and they're going to win 80 games next season. And then, of course, what typically happens is like they sign, Randy Foye or some other stupid moves. So, we're going to talk a lot about that. Brian's not as excited. And then, as mentioned, the thing we've been starting the show on, this is going to be the last week for a while doing it for obvious reasons. We're going to talk Game of Thrones. Now, Brian, the game we had running for about a month was Game of Thrones versus NBA playoffs, where at the start of every week's show, I'd ask the other host, whoever they may be, what they preferred that week, the Game of Thrones episode or the NBA finals or playoffs. Now, obviously, this week Game of Thrones wins in a default, but I'm gonna make it rough. I'm gonna double down.
Oh, interesting.
What was better? The last game of the NBA Finals with the most epic dunk, or not epic dunk, it should have been an epic dunk, but epic block out of LeBron James, or the finale of Game of Thrones?
Oh, I'm never gonna pick the NBA Finals after the Warriors lost, Ray. That's an impossible thing to do. No, it was a good episode. So I guess I'll say the same thing I did last week, which was it was chalk. Like everything we expected to happen ended up happening, although they were considered like shocking moments.
Is that true? Because one of the things that you have been hyping for about a month is Clegane Bowl.
Oh, it's still confirmed. It's just it hasn't happened yet. So the Lancers have to move out of King's Landing somehow. Gregor's got to get in there and meet up. So it'll happen. Maybe during the the big war that happens between everyone. But it's okay. Of course, big news on that front. The Hype Slayer himself, Tommen Baratheon, is dead. No one's more accursed than the Hype Slayer. He paid with his life for banning trial by combat and delaying Clegane Bowl.
Now, obviously the Clegane Bowl wouldn't have included Sandor Clegane unless somehow he got there really quick. Although that is one thing. If I get the time, I would love to do something like tell you the number of miles all of the characters traveled. Because, this season, the worst has been Theon Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy has probably traveled like 10,000 miles this season. And every episode, he's just like, I've got to get to this new place. And somehow, despite being an outcast, despite being poor, despite having, no connections at various times, he's somehow able to travel all over the world. Arya ended back up and, ended back up in Westeros like almost immediately. Spoiler this week. It's possible that Clegane could have just been there, and he's like, I am their hero. And you're like, how did you get here? He's like, well, that's what everybody's doing.
Well, sure, and Varys in episode 9 was in Meereen. He left and went to Dorne. And by episode 10, then by the end of episode 10, he was back in Meereen to be on the ships traveling back to Dorne. So here's the one thing I'll say is we have no idea how much time passes, right? Like, for all we know, months and years could be passing between each episode. So, that's fine with me. I think since everyone's kind of in different places, we don't really know if the time is continuous. So that makes sense.
Which I mean, that's kind of like the Empire Strikes Back argument, which is the only argument that really makes sense for that movie, because Luke's supposed to be getting all of this training. They're supposed to be running from the bounty hunters and in lots of trouble. And it seems like if you're watching the movie that this all takes place over the course of maybe 2-3 weeks. It
Mm.
makes a lot more sense watching Empire Strikes Back to go. Really, this takes place over. If Empire Strikes Back, if the timeline is about a year, maybe 2 years, then it would make sense, right? And then you can just say it would also do a lot for the character development of Leia and Han, actually, to say they've spent the last year or two together, on the Millennium Falcon. If we wanted to really kind of drag out the story, maybe it wasn't just Cloud City that they hit, maybe it wasn't just that one asteroid, maybe they've been to another couple of planets trying to get repairs. That would make a heck of a lot more sense. It would also make a lot more sense for Return of the Jedi, with how much time it takes to make another Death Star. I know, listener, when you tuned in to hear about basketball, and then we said we were going to take a brief detraction to talk Game of Thrones, you were clearly expecting me to do like a script doctoring of Empire Strikes Back, considered one of the greatest movies of all time. So I'm glad you're here. Anyway, so let's get back to Game of Thrones and
Yeah.
crazy teleportation. One note I just have to make, and I have to give a funny story about this too, is Arya is freaking terrifying. So if you haven't seen the
Hmm.
episode, cover your ears. I'm going to give a major spoiler.
Oh, you've already said it 3 times, Drake. Spoil away. Spoil away.
Okay, so the spoiler is end of the episode. Arya kills. Is it Walder Frey? I think is the head dude.
Yeah, Walder Frey and two of his sons, maybe more off camera. We don't know.
Well, just two. And then what gets more terrifying is the way that she has committed the deaths is she's killed Walder Frey's two sons and baked them in a pie, a meat pie of some sort. I'm assuming that's what it looks like,
Yep.
that she has been feeding him. And so he keeps saying, "Call for my sons." And she says, "They're here, sir," or "They're here, my lord." And then eventually she unmasks herself and says, "I want you to know that the last thing you're going to see is a Stark killing you or smiling at you," and kills him. And so we know that she's basically killed the Frey household. And that's huge and kind of nuts. But at the same time, you're like, oh wow, she's a serial killer that just killed like three people and cooked two of them. She's kind of scary.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest developments this week. I mean, she's kind of been going evil for a while, and I think the fact that she's going farther down that path is good. I'm just happy that the Frey pies made it in period. In the books, Manderley did it instead. He sent the pies to Ramsay's wedding, and Walder Frey ate them there. So that's kind of a funny, reminiscent of South Park, Scott Tenorman kind of thing. Although that being said, I don't know which was
That,
first.
by the way, was based off like a Shakespeare play.
Yeah, exactly,
Titus, I think.
exactly. Yeah, so it's been, it's reminiscent of other things, and it was particularly gruesome. The other kind of interesting thing was, I was hoping last week that Sansa was going to go farther heel, and she kind of backtracked a little bit. She kind of made good with Jon again and rebuked Littlefinger. Although who knows, maybe she's just manipulating Jon, and maybe she gets jealous that Jon gets named King of the North.
If
So
you're talking just, one of the things this show it's so hit and miss, and that's what's rough. I was talking to Dave Barry about Game of Thrones. He's never watched it. And I actually I said Game of Thrones is just like being a fan of a sports team. Everybody gets together on Sunday and we watch it. The next day, we're all basically super excited at it performing awesome or super bummed out that it sucked. And, then it's got all, obviously, we got like the Dragons, the White Walkers, we got all these funny team specific terms. It's a sports team. And so sometimes what Game of Thrones does really well, and to be honest, it seems like it does this well when it's kind of ripping off George R. R. Martin. And it sounds funny because it's his show, but what I'm saying is the show has two places to go. They can go from the source material, which is George R. R. Martin, or the showrunners can do their own thing. And it seems like when the showrunners decide to do their own thing, it's not as clever, it's not as intelligent. And to be fair, George R. R. Martin has been writing forever. He's been working on these books forever. He used to work in television. It's not surprising to think that George R. R. Martin is more skilled at setting up clever, nuanced things in Game of Thrones. But so when the show does things well, it's, when it's got clever foreshadowing or clever, blocking. A really cool thing, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but scene I saw is if you go back to season one, when how am I dropping his name? Baratheon. When Baratheon, what's his first name?
The king in season 1 is Robert Baratheon.
Robert Baratheon. When Robert visits the Starks at Winterfell, he, slaps Ned on the chest. He hugs Lady Stark. I can't believe I'm forgetting all their
Catelyn
names.
Stark.
He hugs Catelyn Stark. He tussles Rickon's hair, and so and then he shakes hands with Rob. So all of those characters end up dying. So the question is like, did the king curse them when he saw them? Which is a really clever scene if it was intentional. And then in the book, something that we had seen was when they find the direwolf puppies, they're found because the direwolf has been gutted. Sorry, my dog is moving around, and whenever my dog moves around, he messes up my studio. So that's what the light flickering was. But the direwolf being gutted by a deer, not a deer. What's a male? A buck? Whatever the sigil of House Baratheon is.
Yeah, that's right. No, okay, you got it.
So in the book that happens, and so that's very emblematic of what's going to happen to House Stark. Is they're basically going to get destroyed by the Baratheons, which is thus far what has happened. So anyway, a lot of that's really clever. But in the last episode of the season, basically Littlefinger's sitting in that hall where everybody's declaring, Jon Stark the new King of the North. And that King of the North scene is very reminiscent of Robb being King of the North. So
that's right.
If you're talking going forward, there is a ton getting set up there, right? There's, the Robb Jon parallels is Jon being set up to fail. You've kind of got, Sansa sitting next to him looking up. What's going on there? We keep seeing Littlefinger in the background. We've got other people that, basically little Lady Mormont, who everybody is in love with. She is so awesome. She stands up and is basically saying, here's how you screwed him in the past. Here's how you screwed him in the past. Here's how you screwed him in the past. So you've got a scene where you've got a new alliance forming, but everybody being told, here's how you betrayed them in the past. So there is a lot going on in that scene that we're going to be able to look back at hopefully in a season or so and say, that was really cool how that all played out.
Yeah, so what you're kind of getting at, is the Chekhov's gun theory, right? That if you write a gun, if someone puts a gun into a scene and it does nothing, it's not for no reason. That gun's going to fire later on, right? So, yeah, there's very little wasted in the show. Now, I haven't read the books, unfortunately, but I've kind of heard a little of both ways, which is basically Martin, he does a lot of that stuff, but a lot of his storylines do kind of go a little too far, and maybe some of it did need to get cut off, for the show.
Okay, so yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the episode, which was it was awesome for two reasons. One, because of just I don't want to say the shock value because unfortunately there have been spoilers. I think the guy who played the head crow gave it away in an interview where he was talking about that scene and said, we're all waiting here for Cersei Lannister. And and we're not expecting the bloodbath that's about to happen. So,
well, all serious fans knew it was going to happen. I mean, it's been hinted at by the characters in the show for the past few episodes, especially episode 9, where Qyburn says, "Oh, there's something to that rumor," and he's a pyromancer. His job is to make wildfire. That's the whole point of his guild. So, if he's looking into a rumor, it's probably wildfire to blow up the city, right? So it's been rumored for a long time. It happened. It was very well done. One interesting thing to me with how that went down was that she decided to save Tommen. However, it didn't work out, right? He ended up committing suicide. Of course, as we all know, that's repentance for Clegane Bowl. But, yeah, I mean, so Cersei kind of had this tragedy happen on top of her victory. So where is things going to go with Jaime now? Is he finally going to roll over on her? Like, it's really interesting to see where that'll go. And on top of that, the Lannisters themselves, what happens to them? They have no allies, really. All the North is banded together now. The Tyrells, Dorne, and Daenerys are all together.
The Freys have just been taken out.
The Freys have been taken out, so they have the Tullys. They got Edmure. That's about it.
But I mean, that's the thing. So I'm hoping, because I feel the show is smarter than this. If the show killed off the Blackfish in the way that they claim, they messed up.
We'll see.
I sincerely hope they didn't, because it makes a lot more sense, when he's like, I'm not going to leave this castle, I'm going to stay fighting. In the books, he's alive. In the books, he escaped.
He escapes.
That scene happens mostly the same way, Breen and Sansa don't show up, but the book, it happens very similarly.
Yeah, they're dealing with Lady Stoneheart instead.
But what I was going to say is, if he's still alive and the Freys are dead and they retake the Tullys from Edmure, then they're back on side. So yeah, basically the Lannisters have no friends left, no allies left at this point. Cersei's claim to the throne is nebulous at best, and so that'll be interesting to
And they're
see.
being financially propped up by the Tyrells, and the crown is in debt to the Bank of Iron or whatever the guys in Bravos are. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what their path forward is really. They don't have a lot of legitimacy. They have no bloodline legitimacy, right? All the Baratheons are dead. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the Lancers story goes. I hope they don't just get crushed. I hope there's something left for them because they're just so delightful.
And the last point I'll make on that is I did like that. How do you say her name? The Tyrell, the former queen who died.
Marjorie Tyrell.
Marjorie. I keep missing up names. I wanted to call her Marcella, and that's not right. So Marjorie Tyrell. I did like that. She didn't go out in a really weak way. I like the fact that she was fighting, that she knew what was going on, that she tried to save her brother. I did think that was a good end to her
I wish she
character.
could have made it out, but it's too bad.
Yeah, it's true, but I mean that is this show, right, in general, and it's nice to have that happen again, where it's like we have someone that we like. She's kind of been an ultimate schemer throughout the show, right? And you kind of just assumed, she always knew what she was playing, right? She ended up with Renly, and like, and she's caught on, right? She's like, I know you're gay, Renly, but I'm just here for the power. Renly, then she betrays Renly to end up with the Lannisters to get the queenship again. She has played the game really well, so it's kind of like I'm glad that even when she's going
Well, just
out,
to be pedantic, she doesn't betray Renly. He kind of gets killed out from under her.
well, with
Stannis kills Renly.
Stannis kills when I said betrays Renly, basically her and Loras Tyrell, they basically ride and offer their forces to the Lannisters, and that gets them, off the hook. All right, we've talked a lot about this. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Oh, you missed the biggest reveal of all, which was also everyone expected. Jon is actually a Targaryen. Big surprise there.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel bad about this, but that's kind of like if we were talking the NBA at the end of the season and you were like, you did not mention that Steph Curry won the MVP, and I'm like, I've been saying for the last 5 weeks he's the obvious MVP. It wasn't surprising. I mean, it's nice that it's finally out there, but I don't, at least in the context of how it occurred, nothing really happened with it. I mean, one thing that I'll give them a lot of credit for, actually, so this is the last note on the show, then we'll go into the NBA. One thing I will give the show a lot of credit for is they've set themselves up so that it wasn't really the end of a series, right? They've got a lot of momentum going into the next series. You've got Bran north of the wall with knowledge of Jon, right? You've got Jon, Sansa, and Littlefinger all at Winterfell kind of trying to plot for stuff. You've got Cersei on the Iron Throne. You've got Varys and Dorne, where no one cares about Dorne. Why did we go back to Dorne? Sorry. I don't understand.
Well, no, it's
why.
all because it's all coagulating, or not coalescing, rather, is a better word. Coagulating? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of blood flowing this game. None of it's coagulating. But, no, it's, so Dorne and all those other guys are behind Daenerys now. All the guys of the North are behind Jon. So are they going to gang up and fight the White Walkers together? Are they going to be fighting against each other? Is there going to be, like, the Targaryen battle? Or, I think that's kind of where it's going, is what's going to happen when Jon and Daenerys finally meet? And I don't know, it feels like they're going to be enemies, but even though they are, I guess Jon is, her nephew, but I think they're going to be enemies. We'll see.
Yeah, will definitely be interesting. Okay, so let's get to the NBA in theory, this show we talk about. I have another rant to go on, though, so I put this at the top of our script, Brian. I labeled this the process. So two things in this offseason have happened that have given a lot of people with just something I absolutely hate a little bit of ammunition. I don't even want to say ammunition, but just I get to hear the same argument again. So the Knicks basically traded away two of their best players. They traded away Robin Lopez and I keep forgetting his name, Jose Calderon, for Derrick Rose. Now this on its own was a horrifically bad trade. There was no reason to do this trade because Derrick Rose has been terrible. I mean, not just bad, terrible. He has shot worse than Allen Iverson and still maintained that he is a volume shooter, which is ridiculous. You can't do that. And so, some of the logic people are giving is that, they're clearing the books for future. They're clearing the books to try and make a super team. Now, there's one of two options. One, they're trying to get a couple of big name free agents this season. Now, for the record, they didn't need to trade Lopez and Calderon to do that. They already have the cap space. But, if they go after some big name free agents this season, they're kind of hoping to rebuild. But if not, they've essentially got a bare cupboard and some overrated players. And I've seen some people saying, well, they're clearing the books and they've got a plan. And my problem in the NBA is unless you have a guarantee, like the Knicks would be an example, unless you know, if you believe conspiracy theories, that from the Olympics, right? I think the 2008 Olympics or yeah, 2008 Olympics that, Bosch, Wade, and Ron got together and all discussed it. Unless you know for a fact, clearing the books with the hope of getting a free agency, if clearing the books requires getting rid of good players, especially good players on good contracts. Now, I don't think Calderon, I forget for a fact, but I'll look up really quick. I don't really believe that his contract is spectacular, if I recall. But obviously, Robin Lopez's was quite good. Robin Lopez, a 12 to 13 million dollar a year above average big in the NBA on the new everybody says on the new salary cap. So on the old salary cap, Robin Lopez was worth the money. On the new salary cap, Robin Lopez is a great value at one of the hardest positions to fill. And I actually really like, I really like what the Bulls are doing because they know they're not going to be able to afford to keep Noah, something we'll talk about in a minute. And so they basically replaced Noah. They've replaced Noah. They're probably going to lose Pau Gasol as well. I'm really happy with where they're going. The real question is if Jose Calderon keeps it up. But yeah, I mean, those two guys on their contract this season, Jose Calderon was probably overpriced, but only 1 year, which is huge. Robin Lopez was a great contract that they've just traded away essentially for nothing. And the hope that, Derrick Rose is coming back healthy, we were on that bandwagon 2 years in a row. We were on the if Rose is healthy, the Bulls are a contender train 2014, 2015. And 2016, the 2016 season, was when I finally went, no, I am done with this. I am done saying that the Bulls, if Rose comes back healthy, are good. They need to cut ties with Rose. So I'm really proud that they did. And the only real hard thing for them is going to be, can they replace the production of Pau Gasol from last season? But candidly, given his age and the cap space they have, Bulls, great shape, great trade. Now the Knicks, they got rid of all their good players. They're hoping to maybe get one or two stars in this offseason, and I'm not seeing it. And if people are defending it saying, well, they're clearing off all the books, they're getting rid of all their cap because next season with Derrick Rose's contract expiring, they're going to have all of this cap and they've got a plan. The reason I'm against that is this season. If you give up on a season in the NBA, which I argue when you give up your best players for at best a gambit, you are doing something wrong. And another problem, additionally, is if they're looking to clear cap and looking to kind of get some big name free agents to them, a player that I'm sure is going to leave, Brian, is one of our favorites in Langston Galloway. Langston Galloway is one of these underrated guys that we've loved forever. That I candidly don't even think, even with how much we like him, is going to be worth that much in the free agent market because he's not a yay points player.
Yeah, it's weird what the Knicks are doing. You're right. It's kind of part way. So if they were really trying to tank, I mean, would they still have that big Carmelo Anthony salary around, right? I guess the logic is, well, next season they can bring in some free agent to pair with Anthony. Although we know that's fool's gold because he's not worth that contract. Even the Knicks have got to be thinking, boy, do we really want 3 more years of Anthony? I mean, he is an Olympian this year, but I don't know. Like we were just looking at this Hoops Hype rumor page here. Apparently, the Knicks have wormed their way into the Durant conversation because they had Rose and still have Anthony. So it's kind of interesting what they're doing. And same with the Bulls. I mean, that was a great trade for them, but they were clearing out all their good big men. I mean, Robin Lopez is great, but Gasol is gone for sure. And
Gasol and Noah, I mean, both of those guys.
They're older players.
Noah is a billion years. Not Noah. Pau Gasol is a billion years old, and I was, I thought candidly, and this was how it turned out. The Bulls thought the same way too. They gave Noah like a mediocre contract, right? I think he was like $7 million a year or something like that, if I recall. I'm going to try and look that up really quick. They gave him a mediocre like 2-3 year contract, if I recall, and that's fine, right? They were like, hey, Pau, we just kind of need a stopgap big, someone to kind of help with Noah, and unfortunately, that didn't pan out. But that's what they asked for, and he played spectacularly, and so. I'm trying to see. I think it was 3 years. But anyway, that was kind of luck of the draw. But I buy them now going, yeah, Noah or Gasol, you're actually starting to, this sounds like a weird way of phrasing it, decline again. He showed a big boost in 2015 with them. And then he declined a little last season and played 400 fewer minutes. So they're not stupid. I'm fine with that. With them going, no, Gasol, I'm sorry I keep confusing Noah and Gasol because I keep thinking in my head, I keep thinking Bulls center, and then the wrong one comes out.
Well, I mean, who knows what kind of conversations they have, right? Both those guys are like, "Hey, Bulls, we want 20 million a year." They're like, "Sorry, you're in your 30s now. See you
This
later."
off
So that,
season is going to be bananas. This was another topic. I want to stay on the Knicks a little longer,
yeah,
and the process. But all of sorry. To actually get back to my original point, all of these teams that are kind of planning for the future, planning we're going to clear the books for next year, which the Knicks might be saying, right? Derrick Rose is off that big contract next year, so we'll be able to have money. Well, guess what? They would have had the money had they, they would have had that money um, most of the way. They would have had 7 million on the books. So if all they were looking to do was move Robin Lopez's contract so they had more money next season, that means you just gave up, like based on last year, based on what we think. I think 8 wins is about what he was worth, I think, last season. So they just gave up like 8 wins with the hopes that next season they might be able to coerce a player to come play with them. And that to me is just never forgivable. In the NBA, one of the lines that Andrew Sutton used when he was on the show last week is, too many teams live in the future. Too many teams live in the future, and it really needs to be like European soccer, European football, I guess. You've got to be thinking of the now. And the last line I'm going to give on my trust the process before going to the Knicks fully is I basically say when we grade these teams and these coaches and these front offices, we have to look at them in the context of being an NBA team. And that means that we have to look at, how their ticket sales are doing, how their jersey sales are doing, how their wins are doing. And that always, always, always means we have to include this season, the current season we are in. I am so sick of people saying, well, this team doesn't care about this season. They're thinking about the future. I find that incredibly childish. I find that the exact same as if you're playing a game with a friend and they go, your win doesn't count. I wasn't even trying. And I don't know. There's a fantastic book. Got turned into a movie. It was like the 25 Rules. It was a teacher who wrote his book of like about 25 rules, and he's one of these, happy stories where he boosted the test scores in like a low income area in New York. And then the sad news is like he had to like cut classes to like make the numbers because of how No Child Left Behind works. But anyway, he actually had that where he said, if you lose to someone, you are not allowed to be a bad sport. You can't say I wasn't trying, I wasn't doing my hardest. You just say, look them in the eye and say, good game. So my point on the process is the 76ers have been the worst team in NBA history over the last 3 seasons. I don't think any team, maybe the Clippers, have had a worse 3-year stretch. And you can't look at me and say, well, those seasons don't count. They weren't trying. I go, I don't give a blank. I almost cussed there, Brian. I don't give a blank because that's not the game we're playing. The game we are playing is be an NBA team, which means if you're not trying to sell tickets this season, if you're not trying to win games this season, unless, and this isn't going to happen, by the way, I can guarantee you that, unless the 76ers win 65 games a season for the next 4 years. I said 4. If they win 70 wins, they can get by 3. Unless they win 65 wins for the next 4 seasons, they wasted 3 years. And you can't tell me, looking at the assets they've accrued, one, you can't tell me they really did anything outside of the norm. I did some back of the napkin math on the 76ers. They essentially had I think about a 72% chance to be in the position to get at least one number one pick. If you're going to be the worst team in the league 3 years in a row, they had a 71% chance to get a number one pick, and they had about a 41% chance, which was the biggest bin of all the possibilities. It's kind of like rolling sevens in craps. They had like a 41% chance of ending up with just one number one pick after 3 seasons of tanking 3 seasons in a row. Well, guess what? They're in that situation. They ended up exactly where you'd expect them to be. And you can't really impress me. Like in the NBA, for me to be impressed with a good front office, you have to exceed what would be expected out of average. And the fact that they basically ended up in the average position, and not even that, even worse, right? They're a 10-win squad. Unless you are absolutely convinced that some of these players are going to have major growth, unless you are absolutely convinced that Ben Simmons is going to come out of the game a 20-win player, which, spoiler alert, I'm willing to bet on this, he's not. Like, Karl Anthony Towns is one of the best players we've seen in contemporary NBA history, and he came out of the gates and won like 10 wins, which is fantastic. That's great.
That only gets you to 20.
That's not enough, and even expecting growth. So my basic point in the process, when we look at teams like the Knicks and people saying, well, they're thinking about next year, no. That's not the game you're playing. We talk Game of Thrones, in the Game of Thrones, the famous quote, like, in the big game, you have to play or die or whatever. I can't even remember the quote. I should just make up a quote. I should just be like, as they say in the Game of Thrones, may the force be with you. Whatever. The game we're playing is be an NBA team, and being an NBA team means focusing on winning now because I've said this a lot before. Player contracts are 4 to 5 seasons. Player careers are about 6 seasons. What coaches get fired after 3. If you're trying to convince me you're playing a 6-year game in a league where basically after 3 years everything kind of resets, not doing it for me. So F the process. That includes the 76ers and the Knicks. I'm not giving either of them any credit. I'm not giving the 76ers any credit because they managed to get a number 1 pick, which we expect to happen in 70% of the universes out there, at the cost of 3 seasons of the NBA. I'm not giving the Knicks any credit of giving away their best player with the hopes that they'll give something in the future. All these teams that hope for the future while ignoring the present are doing it wrong. And I'm sorry, everybody who tries to tell me otherwise, it's gotten maddening at this point. We have over 30 years of the NBA history to look at, like over like about 20 of the modern NBA with like modern draft picks and stuff. So we have like 20 years of the modern NBA. We don't have to like ask if this strategy is a one that normally works. It normally doesn't. And the strategies that work, it's so odd that nobody kind of copies them.
Yeah, and contrast it with the Warriors. I mean, you just have to look at the value of, these young players. Like, they paid $2.4 million to buy a second-round pick just for no value, right? They just said, here's some cash for this pick. And they drafted McCaw, who was a top 30 win producer in college. So what's the chance he'll turn out to be a good player? Not very high, but it's not significantly lower than any of these guys, the 76ers are drafting. What the Warriors also do, and the Mavericks for that matter, they signed all the undrafted top win producers from small schools. Walk-Up we were talking about is on the Warriors Summer League team. The Mavericks got 2 of the top small school guys as well. So yeah, I mean, you never know when a young player is where he's gonna come from. You don't have to overpay for them. I will disagree with you about the Knicks slightly though, and hear me out on this, Dre. I know it's going to be hard for you to do.
All right.
Hear me out on this. So I don't think. So Arturo was saying this too. He thinks they're trying to clear cap space or whatever and tank. I don't think they are. I think they're honestly trying to win as much as they can. I think they just have bad personnel decisions. I think they said Lopez and Calderon are not our 2 best players. They're just kind of crap players, and we're going to trade for Derrick Rose, who we think is better. Maybe a gamble, but man, he's a great player, right? And in turn, that's going to attract Durant or some free agent.
So their logic, I think what you're saying, and this kind of makes sense, is their logic was Lopez and Calderon are mediocre players. And this is a classic story on every team Melo's bid on, right? You have these teams that kind of outperform what you expect. And by the way, the Knicks were a 30-win team last season, so I don't know what they're outperforming. But they go, Marcus Camby and Andre Miller aren't the secret sauce of this team. It's Carmelo Anthony, right? We got to get better players around Carmelo. So they clearly think, and it's questionable, they clearly think Calderon is going to be upgraded by Derrick Rose. And they're thinking, I think what you're arguing is they're saying, we're going to trade Lopez and Calderon. That's going to clear space so that we can upgrade Lopez with a better big. And to be candid, if they get Durant, no complaints. Durant is an upgrade to Lopez. And then you're arguing it, and they're thinking probably Rose is an upgrade to Calderon. So, it's funny, there's like are you just bad or are you stupid? And I'm arguing bad and you're arguing stupid. If you're a Knicks fan, neither is good. Above the Gods in the chat, I love a comment he made. He said, I live in New York City. New York fans are in a perpetual state of self-deception. So yeah, basically your options as a Knicks fan is you're either being run by a stupid front office, which, with who's that owner? I'm dropping names like mad.
Dolan.
Dolan. I don't. My brain apparently isn't working, but Dolan is horrible in every sense of the word. So it's not hard to believe they have a stupid front office, but then at the same time, it's easy enough to believe they're making stupid decisions for the future too.
I don't know. I think my scenario is slightly better for them because I think being the 70 no, but hear me out again. Being the 76ers and not even trying to win, I think is even worse. Now with Colangelo, that is. You can argue with Hinkie, maybe it's a little better, but yeah, I mean they're going to offer Harrison Barnes.
Our next topic, actually, because of that,
yeah.
Trying to do something is better than nothing. I made a tweet today that got some love, and it was a subtweet of Harrison Barnes. No joke. So the tweet I made is I said something like, NBA teams think that free agency is like a multiple choice quiz. Oftentimes, none of the above is the correct answer. And so this is obviously an answer at, not an answer, a comment about Harrison Barnes, where, if your options are like Harrison Barnes, Nick Batum, or Kevin Durant. I'll throw those 3 names. Let's say your front office is targeting those 3, and Kevin Durant gets picked up. and Nick Batum resigns, and you go, well, the only player we got left is Harrison. We got to go for Harrison Barnes. I argue you can just cut your losses and say no. And so what's funny to your point is you're saying at least they're trying, at least they're doing something. Well, the one problem with trying, right, is that's how you end up with Amari Stoudemire and Carmelo Anthony signed
Yeah.
for like $50 million over the next 5 seasons and, being unmovable. So, sometimes it's worse as a fan to have a front office that tries when they are so bad at what they are doing.
I can
When you
kind of
go,
agree with that.
when like so here's the funny, like take a look at the Raptors, and to be fair, the Raptors did their damnedest to f everything up before Masai got there. The Raptors, right? You're like, if this current front office, I believe Colangelo was one of them. I don't know if he was the one right before Masai, but Colangelo was on the Raptors. You're like, if this front office would just stop and we got a competent front office in here, we could do something. We could make it to the conference finals. We could be 2 games away from the NBA finals, and that's what happened. And so I think for Knicks fans, it's like you would just almost prefer that Dolan and maybe Phil Jackson at this point, you would almost prefer that they were inept and stop trying and hope that maybe they would hire a GM that would do something more so than you're like, by the time a new GM gets there, it's like Melo's signed for $100 million. Rose is signed for $100 million. You picked up Andrea Bargnani. How the heck am I supposed to do anything with this team? So, uh, maybe I haven't done polls in a while, Brian, and maybe I'll start making polls again because I do enjoy them. Maybe I'll make that. Like, would you prefer your front office to be inept and not try, or try very hard but suck at it?
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is if you have a bad front office, no matter what their philosophy is, they're just not going to do well.
Well, the last point on that, and this is just the truth of the NBA, and we've seen this. I mean, I would argue the Knicks are, or not the Knicks, though he did work for the Knicks. I'd argue like Pat Riley of Miami is an example where I'm not 100% sure how great they've been at everything. Signing Chris Bosh to his current contract, even before, really sucks about the clots in his lungs. And candidly, I really hope he doesn't endanger his life to play basketball. He's talked to his doctor, he knows his stuff. But I would find it tragic if he, I can understand that he really wants to play, but I would really find that tragic. But, I question how good Miami really was at a lot of stuff. But they had one season, right, where Braun, Wade, and Bosh, and at the time, Bosh looked fantastic. I think I would just argue it's a very Kevin Lovish situation. He wasn't a good fit on that team. But they had 3 of the best free agents fall into their lap, essentially, because they wanted to play together and the salary cap worked up and everything worked up. And had a couple other good players, Mike Miller as an example, come over to them. So any team can have a winning squad fall into their lap. So it's rough. We talk about Knicks fans being delusional. The Knicks, I would even argue under Isaiah, under Isaiah Thomas, there were probably 2 off seasons that they were much closer than people realized to a title. Because there were some off seasons where, Isaiah Thomas targeted these big name free agents, like, Steph Marbury or whatever. And obviously, if he'd had the option of Tim Duncan or the option of LeBron James or the option of Steve Nash, right? Although Steve Nash got traded for Steph Marbury, which is, whatever. If he'd had the option for all of these players, he probably would have gone for it. And, he kind of he chose poorly, right? So I think any team
Is that an Indiana Jones reference, Dre?
Hey, good.
So,
good.
well, yeah, that's all it is, right? It's yay points, not understanding where winning comes from. It's going for volume, inefficient shooters like Carmelo Anthony and Derrick Rose, and not like actual guys that rebound and do efficient type play. I mean, that's all it comes down to, right? Valuing the wrong kinds of players.
Yeah, and so, but the thing is, the advantage is there's an overlap. An example I'll give is the plus minus statistic is one you will hear me shout from here to infinity about how stupid it is. Now, what I want to be clear about my problems with plus minus is essentially it is too noisy and too broad for you to be able to get the information you're looking for. That's all I'm saying. It's too noisy for you to be able to use it for what you want to use it for. When someone says with Melo on the court, actually the best example I've come up with, Brian, is the lineup of death on the Warriors. The lineup of death on the Warriors, I think, played combined less than a game together. If you look over the full NBA season, the total number of minutes they played together. So, or I think maybe they played 2. I think they played like 500 minutes. An NBA game is 240. So I think that was like, 2.5 games. You can point out that the Warriors lost a game to the Lakers. They lost a game to the Nuggets. They lost a game to the Bucks. If you looked at just those 3 games of the Warriors season, you would not get a very clear picture of how good the Warriors are. And so when you look at, 2 to 3 games worth of data of lineup statistics of on-off stuff, you just simply cannot get enough data to make a concrete enough picture. So it's absolutely one reason I hate plus minus statistics. Now that being said, there are often times where plus minus statistics line up with what we say, right? People will say the best player in the NBA this season for plus minus is LeBron James. Maybe. I'm not saying that's ever happened, but I'm saying, well, it's not surprising because we go, this is the correlation causation thing that everybody brings up. Just because two things are correlated doesn't mean one causes the other, but sometimes they are. And, it's not hard to say, well, LeBron James is the best player in the NBA. And when he's on the court, he helps his team win. So it's not surprising that when he's on the court, his team does better when he's off the court. But at the same time, players like Derek Fisher that always played next to Shaq and Kobe, we could say the same thing about, and you just can't get the data. So sometimes things line up together. So I'm saying, yay points, we bash. We say teams overvalue scoring. But guess what? Sometimes the best scorers, right? If you looked at, okay, this last season, right, some of the best scorers, if you targeted Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, I'm trying to think who else was just a fantastic scorer. And I mean by conventional wisdom, right? So I'm going to go to the box score geeks.
Jimmy Butler, I think, put up a lot of points per game efficiently.
So I'm looking at most points per 48 minutes with a 500 minute floor. So if you want to show the listeners, Brian, if you go to, geez, Steph Curry, man, that never looks right. All right. So actually this makes a lot of sense. Okay. So of the top 6 players in the NBA, and guess what? We are the top 7. We really like 5. So this isn't hard. Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, DeMarcus Cousins, James Harden, LeBron James, Damian Lillard, Isaiah Thomas. Those are the top 7 players in the NBA when it comes to points per 48 minutes. Now, guess what? If you looked at us, and then if you go a little further, by the way, you get Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Klay Thompson. So let's look at that list down to, actually, I'm going to go a little further, Brian, down to DeMar DeRozan. So if you have that up, if you go to the Players tab on Boxscore Geeks, sort by points per 48, and then click the 500 minutes tab. I'm trying to let the audio listeners know. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You look at the top 12 players, right? Top 12 players in the NBA in terms of points per 48. If I asked you to pick half of those randomly, there is a fantastic team. And then there's also some landmines, right? We'd argue DeMarcus Cousins is way overrated. We argue Damian Lillard is just about average. We'd argue that, Klay Thompson and DeMar DeRozan just, are average. So you have a star best team in the NBA in there, and then you also have an average squad in there. And so guess what? When a team has the option, when a team is targeting 3 free agents, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, DeMarcus Cousins, 2/3 of the time they're going to luck into the right player, even though we argue they're using the wrong metric for their assessment.
Well, yeah, and absolutely, and that's why the bad teams stay bad, right? They aren't actually. I don't think you could say that every team would do that. Like, I mean, the Warriors are not going to go after Cousins. There's no way, right? They know he's. I think they're smart enough to know he's not that great of a player, but you're right. Kobe Bryant and Carmelo Anthony are not that farther down that list too, and obviously they didn't have great years either. So I mean, yeah, it's. I think that's what the Knicks are falling for, and. I mean, we'll see, right? Again, off seasons are a small sample size too, right? Teams don't make a ton of transactions, really, and even then, they make even fewer big transactions, signing big star players, right, or making trades. So,
and that's our point. When we had that 2-hour draft show, if you haven't listened, it's up on Monday. So we watched the draft and we talked about some players. My general point was, most of this doesn't matter. The draft doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. The draft, the reason NBA front offices are so excited about a draft is every season you put 60 players into the player pool of the NBA on heavily reduced contracts. And that is fantastic for bargaining purposes, right? That's fantastic for, even in your, when you're free agents, when you're mid-tier free agents say, I would like a raise, they go, screw you, I'm just going to sign a rookie on the 3rd year or whatever. So that's why NBA teams like it, but it doesn't really matter for that. For NBA teams to win usually boils down to 1 or 2 really good players. And so the bad teams traditionally miss out because they target the wrong players. But even bad teams have found their way into targeting good players. The Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that we have bashed repeatedly because they're a horribly run team, and I don't see that changing anytime in the future. But, they lucked into Kevin Garnett and then lucked into being smart enough at the time. Don't forget, this was back in the day before the current salary system. They lucked into just offering him a big freaking contract and it being worth it. So, the irony is, right, if they'd had Allen Iverson, they probably would have done the same thing. And then instead of going, man, those, Minnesota Timberwolves had some really good teams with Kevin Garnett, we'd go, man, they were such a horrible team.
Yeah, for sure. And also I think well, I mean, we're talking about Harrison Barnes, right? Teams don't know what to attribute the winning to. They're like, well, the Warriors are winning, so everyone on that team must be good, right? We're going to give Harrison Barnes a max contract. We're probably going to give Festus Ezeli a lot of money too. And
let's get into let's talk Harrison Barnes, and
I'll talk Harrison
Festus Ezeli, because I know that's an S topic. And actually, it's funny, you didn't know if we'd have that much to talk about. We've still got like 4 topics to go, and I think we've been going for almost an hour.
Yeah, we only got like 10 minutes left.
Okay, so Harrison Barnes, this guy is my favorite, because in this offseason, I've heard some people say, can the Warriors really let him walk? He's better than nothing. And the issue is, one of my favorite people, Snotty Drippin, I forget his real name, which makes me feel bad. But, he goes by Tweetwood Mac, and I know his real name's come up because he got really famous because of Temecula. And if you don't know the story, basically he got in a fight on Twitter. He's the biggest Kobe hater. He's even a bigger Kobe hater than me. And someone got in a fight with him on Twitter over Kobe Bryant, and they said they would drive up to Temecula to fight him over it. So anyway, Snotty Drippin made the point, basically, no, it's not that Harrison Barnes is worse than nothing. It's Harrison Barnes on a $20 million and likely 4-year deal is worse than nothing, significantly worse than nothing. And we talk about this a lot. The NBA is all about optimization. You are optimizing minutes to good players. You are optimizing money to players. You're optimizing shots between players. That's all the NBA is. And so Harrison Barnes has a lot of problems going for him for the Warriors. One, every minute Harrison Barnes plays as a player, another player doesn't play. And for a team that, they candidly are quite strong. They have Festus. They have, we talk Sean Livingston. They have some other good players. And to be fair, Harrison Barnes 2 years ago looked fantastic. He was one of the biggest, he was a big reason behind that jump the year they won a title. But he got injured and has not looked the same. And so the rough part the Warriors have to be in is, if you've got a player that has not played well an entire season, an entire postseason, an entire finals, and he's up for a contract and he's going to get paid, do you risk it on that player, or do you let that player go and spend that salary cap? And here's the rough part. I candidly believe that if you don't think Harrison Barnes is healthy, you could get an average player for $5 to $6 million a season easy in this upcoming offseason. It's going to cost you 3 to 4 times that for Harrison Barnes, and he may not end up being worth it. And what's more, he's going to cost you minutes and money and flexibility in the future. I mean, one problem people seem to forget when you talk about signing players like Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is a fantastic example of this. When you sign Derrick Rose at the hopes that he'll come back, but you sign him $20 million a year, most teams are not able to not play Derrick Rose. They go, oh my God, we've invested $20 million a year in the season. If he says he's healthy, we got to give him a shot, right? We got to give him a shot. And I haven't looked into this yet, but I guarantee you there were games last season. And, don't forget, the Bulls barely missed the playoffs. I guarantee you there were a couple games last season that Derrick Rose, because he came into the game and took 20 shots and made like 5 of them, I guarantee you he cost them a couple games.
That's really interesting. So the Bulls could have been in the playoffs, made all that playoff money and everything. But yeah, well, I mean, yeah, your multiple choice tweet today was right on, and I've been having the same frustrations watching all these rumors. And I guess I will say that I'm not excited. I'm not unexcited by all these rumors. They are exciting to me. I just don't have a lot to say about them, which is basically, well, all the good players are linked to all the teams, and whoever gets the good players are going to be better. And whoever gets the bad players for bad money are going to be worse. Boom, there's my free agency synopsis, right? So it's still exciting to watch all the rumors, though.
You and me are the worst. Like, when you combine the two of us, I'm glad you were more excited about the draft, because when you combine you and me, during the draft, I was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who they draft. None of this matters.
Yeah.
Mic drop. Nihilism. Right?
This is a victory for nihilism, Dave. But no, all I was going to say is that the way it's put out there is, well, the Warriors are going for Kevin Durant, and if they don't get him, they're going to try to get Whiteside or Horford or Mozgov or David West, and then they might try to get Batum or they'll try to get Barnes. And it's like, well, the amount of money each of these contracts matters, right? Like Dwight Howard on the Warriors for $20 million, I'd be like, well, Dwight Howard's a really good center still. I'd say he's pretty underrated at this point. Would I rather have Dwight Howard for 20 million or Bogut for 10 million or maybe even less? There's talks he might accept the stretch clause.
If they have an option at Dwight Howard, you take Dwight Howard. I'm sorry.
Oh, interesting. So, but again, it's not clear. Like, it's a question though. It's something you have to think about, right? The amount of money players sign matters. If I get Harrison Barnes back again for I don't know 10 million or 7 million out of the new deal, I'd be like, yeah. I mean, we're gonna have Sean Livingston for 5.7 on the Warriors next season. That's probably a good deal for him. But then if you're saying Barnes is going to be 15, 20 million a year, no way you want him back. So the amount of contract matters. It's not just musical chairs here. Some of those chairs are different than others.
I love that point. Yeah, it's not just musical chairs and contracts mattering. That is such a huge point. That's all we're saying. Like in this offseason, the one reason the offseason gets, I think you're less concerned, is because of the max salary clause in the NBA CBA, which basically says you're only allowed to play, I think, right at this point it's between 20 and 25 mil a season.
Yeah, I think the super, bird rights is 25 million for your own team, whatever that's called. I'm getting the term wrong.
I think it's actually higher if you go to the Larry Kuhn CBA FAQ, which I'll try and do in the background when I'm talking. But I mean, basically, your point is, if you're able to, and it's rough, he's a rough one right now, but based on the last couple of seasons, he still seems worth it, especially since you could probably trade him after 2 years if things were going well. Don't forget that Shaq was declining on Miami, and they were still able to trade him for Sean Marion, and then their only real problem is they kind of shut down that season. But anyway, if you're able to offer LeBron James $30 million a year, you go, okay, and you offer LeBron James $30 million a year because he's worth more than that. And the same with Durant, the same with Curry, et cetera, et cetera. So, what it all boils down to is the offseason right now, when we still have so many good names out there, right? We still have LeBron James. I think has he said he's going to resign, or am I crazy?
Yeah, he has said he's going to stay in Cleveland. I mean, who knows? Things change, but it seems very likely he's going to come back.
Okay, so LeBron James, he's still out there though. He hasn't signed yet. Don't forget, not Derrick Rose. Dwayne Wade thought he was coming back to Miami. So
what about Carlos Boozer in Cleveland?
Wow, that'd be interesting. But anyway, so you've still got Durant and LeBron and Dwight Howard, right? I guess you've still got some marquee free agents out there, and until those have been settled, you're right, because it's an easy win, right? Like I remember the season when what's his name? I'm just off my name game today, people.
Which team? Which season?
The owner or the Daryl Morey of the Houston Rockets. When he picked up Dwight Howard, you're just like A+ grade, and you're like, well, would any team in the NBA at that time not have given Dwight Howard that contract? Obviously. So I think you and I are in the same boat, where basically it comes down to contracts, where all rookie contracts are exploitative, and most rookies don't matter. So I go, and all superstars are worth the money, and whatever team gets them, it changes the course. One last note. By the way, I'm going to Noah was our next subject, and I just kind of want to skip Noah because we talked the Knicks a lot, or not Noah. I don't know why I was confusing Noah with Harrison Barnes and Robin Lopez. Sorry. Anyway, so Joakim Noah, apparently the Wizards are linked to being targeted, maybe for a max. Apparently
that's been debunked. That's been debunked.
Okay, so here's what I'm hoping. What I was going to say about that, I'm glad you said it's debunked. I was going to say he has a fantastic agent. Noah needs to give that agent a raise. Because what I was going to say, I actually put a tweet out a couple days ago, a poll where I said, is Noah going to make more than $100 million or less than $100 million in this upcoming free agency? I really hope teams aren't targeting Noah at that. I mean, if he gets that, you can just guarantee that Hassan Whiteside and Bismack Biyombo are going to be rubbing their hands together going, we're going to get paid. Noah would not be my first choice for this. But if teams like the Knicks and the Wizards are targeting with that much money, I don't really know what's going on, especially when he was worth the money, when he had his restricted free agency and signed an extension with the Bulls. He didn't get the max. So when he was worth the max, he didn't get it. I really hope he doesn't now. So anyway, I guess that's good. My only comments on Noah is he is not worth over $100 million a season. We love the guy. We think production-wise he might be worth it. But even the skills he brings, their value on the market isn't worth that, and we don't know if he's healthy. So teams enter at your own peril. And then we kind of talked Durant, and all I wanted to say on Durant, good. It looks like our last three subjects are going to be quick, Brian. So all I
Yep.
wanted to say on Durant is my personal opinion is at this point I would resign with OKC. Everybody's Andrew Sutton was saying back when we first started talking it that his contract's the best, right? His bird rights, signing a 1 year deal, flexibility, all that is best if he signs for OKC for 1 season. Now it does provide an interesting problem. I think you were telling me this and have been reading that does enter into a prisoner's dilemma where if he signs a 1 year deal next year, him and Westbrook both have to either both stay or if one leaves, they screw the other. So that'll be interesting for next season. They're not currently in a prisoner's dilemma because if Kevin Durant and Westbrook get together and say, we've got a dynasty, and Durant says, I'm going to sign long this season, and Westbrook says, I'm going to pick up my extension as soon as I'm eligible next season, they're fine. So they're not in a prisoner's dilemma yet. But my personal take on the Thunder in 1 season is it's the best location, and I put it even above the Golden State Warriors at this point when you factor in money because you look at that starting lineup. That starting lineup could have Westbrook, Oladipo, Durant, Enes Kanter, Steven Adams, and then our favorite I don't know how to say his first name, but Sabonis off the bench. With another one or two decent, I think they got Andre Roberson still on the team. If that team lets like Randy Foye and Dion Waiters walk, that team is amazingly strong and deep. So I actually like OKC best for Durant right now. I haven't looked at like the Spurs situation, but if I'm Durant, I would pick OKC. If Durant picks New York, I'll say more power to you, but I will laugh at him so hard because it won't be for more money. And I'm sorry, even though New York is a bigger market than Oklahoma City, I got to buy that an Oklahoma City team going to the finals is worth more in marketing than New York. So I don't think Durant is heading in New York, but if he ends up in New York, I'm going to laugh very, very hard.
Yeah, so here's what he. So first of all, I agree with everything you said. Like if you're Durant and you're trying to be a rational optimizer, make the most money, yeah, you'd stay there for sure. The way it's being reported though is that he wants to resolve things this offseason and commit somewhere long term. Like he just wants to get it all over with, right? He doesn't want to stretch it out for another year, and then he may not care if he gets a super max or not so super max from another team. Now, who knows if that's true or not, right? Maybe he's just saying that to for leverage, but I mean that could mean that he could go somewhere else. He could also sign that 1+1 with a different team, leave his flexibility open, and do it that way. So we'll see what he does. I still think it's likely he'll stay, but it's tough to see what happens with Durant.
I am shocked that basically for the last 4 or 5 years I've been mocking Oklahoma City because they had such a strong core, and I went, all you need to do is get decent role players, and they didn't. And in 1.5 seasons, they did great, right? Dion Waiters and Dion Waiters and Randy Foye had me laughing so much, especially since the Nuggets benefited from the Randy Foye trade. But the fact that they grabbed Oladipo, the fact that they drafted Sabonis, the fact that they have Andre Roberson off the bench, that team looks amazingly strong, and it only took them 1.5 seasons. Which, by the way, this was like our entire Portland point, right? Picking up undervalued, productive players is so much easier than trying to get stars, and so they finally did it. We should feel sad. The Thunder likely should have one or two more finals appearances in their history, but that's the way it goes.
And I don't totally agree with you and Andrew and others here. I still think Ibaka is a little underrated just because he had one bad year. I don't think he's totally done.
Here's my point on that, and so let me explain because I don't necessarily disagree, but I do think this like it's actually remarkably similar to Harrison Barnes, where you have a player that's injured, and you go, if they come back, they'll be good because Harrison Barnes is going to be really easy. Harrison Barnes could be Klay Thompson 2.0, Brian. I'm really waiting for it to happen. So I want that out at least on the record that I'm being cognizant of it ahead of time because Harrison Barnes last season wins per 48 of 0.42. That's half as good as an average player. 2 seasons ago, he's star level.
Right.
There's a player that 2 seasons ago is star level, is shooting 57.3% true shooting over 40% from three. If Harrison Barnes comes back, he'll be worth the money. But what we're saying is he has been horrible for a season, and you don't want to risk the contract he is going to require to get that.
I know, and that's what I was going to say, Dre, is it's being reported the reason they traded Ibaka is because they can't re-sign him. That he said he wants to leave, he wants a more expanded role. I guess that means more shots. So yeah, if Ibaka says, I'm not coming back, I'm not re-signing with you guys no matter what, you absolutely have to trade him. And to get, a package like they got is a pretty good deal for them.
Well, and also if they're, I'm taking a look. So let's see. That was the Magic. That'll be interesting. I mean, we really like Aaron Gordon on the Magic. We really, I think we liked one of their trades. So it's an interesting one. We'll see how that goes up. So
yeah,
anyway,
if they could put Aaron Gordon at small forward and Ibaka at power forward, that'd probably be better for Gordon. That'd be interesting.
So anyway, he's 12.5 million this upcoming season. And as you're pointing out, he's going to leave. So normally I hate we don't want to lose him for nothing, right? When the Timberwolves traded away Kevin Love because they were going to lose him in the offseason for nothing, I went, "Are you effing crazy? You go for the title now." Well, if you're not 100% certain Ibaka's back healthy, which I don't think is a bad guess, then absolutely get a package worth it. And I really think, especially since they were hurting at shooting guard, the Oladipo Sabonis trade, Ilyasova, the irony of that, right? They got Ilyasova. Am I mistaken in that?
They did.
Ilyasova is a player just like Ibaka, where years ago he was good and has been struggling recently. So
yeah,
that they got, if the Minnesota Timberwolves had traded Kevin Love for, say, Jimmy Butler, I would have said absolutely. Get Jimmy Butler on a long deal. You don't know if Kevin Love is coming back. And maybe not even Jimmy Butler's too easy. I'm trying to think. I'd have to look back at that.
Klay Thompson, season. Maybe?
No, not Klay Thompson. So
I'm trolling.
All right. But, had they been able to get back a maybe close to star, if not same level of Kevin Loveness, I would have said absolutely. So let's say... All right, how about this? Like maybe, oh wow, this was back when he was good. This is so painful to me, Brian. Actually, Serge Ibaka would have been a good example. If they could traded like Kevin Love for Serge Ibaka, I'd have been like, all right, you're losing one of the best players, you're losing a star, but you are getting a very good player in return. So
and Above the Gods has an interesting point in chat, and I love conspiracy theories, which is that Ibaka is actually in his mid-30s and he's lying about his age, so he's not going to recover. And
this reminds me of what's his name? A really good player drafted by the Spurs and traded to the Rockets and diminished quickly. Luis Scola, same idea. But
anyway. Well, he was just old and not that good. But speaking of the Spurs, news updates on them. They have tendered an offer to Boban, so they're not letting him go. Manu Ginobili is not retiring.
Well, maybe. The tendering the offer, he's a restricted free agent. So what tendering the offer means is they are not giving up on his restricted free agency rights. And they're getting the cap hold required to keep him. If Boban gets an offer for more, he's allowed to take it, and then the Spurs are allowed to match. But I mean,
exactly.
That's
the side they value him, which is what we were hoping, right? And on top of that, they will be going after Pau Gasol as well, supposedly.
Okay, let's get our last two out of the way. My dogs are apparently turning on the light and saying it's about time to go. So let's get there. The Spurs, you put on the script, Manu says he's not retiring. I don't know what to do here. It's really a question of, the theme of this week's show, clearly, Brian, is contract, right? We're saying, how much is he asking for? So here's the rough part. Manu Ginobili played at close to star level last season, only played 1,100 minutes, but let's not forget, part of the reason he was out was a freak injury. He got, when we talk about, your boy Draymond Green kicking people in the nuts in the playoffs, that's actually why Manu Ginobili went out freakishly. He got a testicle contusion or something.
Ooh.
So the question is, what's he going to ask for? I mean, if he asks for a 1-year deal at $7 million or less, I'd say the Spurs probably give it to him. That's just a question there. And the only real hardship for them becomes if they have a shot, if they have a shot at Kevin Durant and they have to, renounce their rights to Manu Ginobili and let go of Boban to sign him, but we're going to have to wait and see on Manu. I don't see a problem with him coming back. We'll just have to see the contract. The Spurs targeting Pau Gasol is interesting. Same reason. I don't know what kind of contract they're going to offer him. Because at his age, and he's seeming to diminish, I don't know if I want him. I don't want him for more than two seasons at most, and I probably don't want him for more than $11 million a season at the
most. He's
most.
35 right now.
So that's really rough. And then Above the Gods is also telling us that Tim Duncan has exercised his team option, which I assume is for the Spurs. It would be very odd if he had a team option on another team. So if you're the Spurs, I don't really this people joke about the Spurs being old, and that's not true. They've got Danny Green, they've got Kawhi, they've got LaMarcus Aldridge,
Kyle Anderson even and played well last season. We like
Kyle
him too.
Anderson.
And Boban.
And Boban. I don't know. The problem is if you've got Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Pau Gasol, you've got four really old players that kind of demand minutes. So I don't know if I'm a fan. We'll see what happens.
Well, that's a problem with guys that age, right? They could fall off at any time, and that could be rough for the Spurs. But again, it's money, money, money. Where's our Ted DiBiase walk-in music when we need it?
Yeah. Wait, why are you asking me? You're the producer. You could have had that ready.
Yeah. Well, actually, I retract that statement. We didn't say anything about Ted DiBiase. Please don't DMCA us, WWE. Please don't do that again.
I was about to send you something that you could have put up. But I was going to say, no. Actually, I would have preferred Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon.
Oh, Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money. Would have been a better theme.
Yeah,
I mean, not taken away from Ted DiBiase. He's a classic. It's one of the best. And I actually like his theme, but I will say I do think Shane O'Mac's Here Comes the Money is a better theme. And one if we weren't worried about, as you're mentioning, the only show we've had taken off of YouTube, which is still in a mess in terms of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, has been WWE. Like, Brian showed one clip from the Hell in the Cell, which actually there was the anniversary of it this last week. Showed one clip from it, and they pulled a show where you're talking other stuff. Anyway, all right. So we talked a little bit about Ibaka, but let's end on that. You mentioned he didn't resign because he said he wasn't going to resign. He wanted a bigger role. We said he was bad last season, so not a bad trade. I don't really have any complaints on that. I like Above the Gods' point that it's possible he's just older than he appears. So I don't mind the Thunder walking around. The Thunder. You know what? For all the years I've been giving the Thunder flack about poorly run teams and playing the wrong players, the Thunder looked well coached last season, and the Thunder look like they're picking up good role players. So good on you, Thunder. I'm gonna say it right now, Brian, because I love getting in trouble for predictions. I'm gonna say the Thunder win the NBA title next season, and if I can bet a cheap amount,
I would wait until Durant decides where he's going before you make that bet.
No, Brian, I'm saying it now. I'm saying Durant comes back to the Thunder, and they're the favorites for the title. I'm saying.
So you're looking to parlay it then, in a way.
Calling it now. All right. Well, anyway, that's all I got, Brian. I do have a shout out. Let me see if I can find it. So if you have one in front of me, let me know.
No, I don't have any shout-outs. Just, again, Andrew Sutton for coming on the last few shows, and I'm sure we'll get him on in the future. That was great to have him on. Andrew Sutton is a great low-usage player. He can get some great points in without talking over us like we like to talk over each other. So I thought he did a great job on the show. And, of course, Above the Gods and everyone else in chat this week.
Unmoved.
Thanks,
by the way,
guys.
I've got to give a negative shout-out.
Okay, good.
Shout out to Twitch.tv, which we normally like. It's what we broadcast with. It's enjoyable. Twitch.tv uses a bizarre greenish font for every other name. And so Above the Gods in this blue, easy to read, I can say Above the Gods says. Now, Unmove actually answered our question that Colangelo was the GM right before Masai Ujiri. I can't read that name, and I have to hover over it to read it. So I'm going to give a negative shout out to Twitch.tv for making it hard to read some of our fantastic commenters' names.
To counter your shout out, Dre, you can customize that, so look into your settings.
Why is that the default? I'm still going to argue. Not letting go, Brian. But anyway, thank you very much to Above the Gods and Unmove in the comment section. My shout out, I couldn't find a link to this, Brian, but I'm sure you can find it quick, is to LeBron James. So LeBron James, they were talking about the infamous block, or famous block, depending on which side of the fence you were on. His block to win the NBA Finals, which, he didn't win it. It was, keep the game tied. But he said, I had to get it back. Andre Iguodala, I'm actually going to say it, is a bad motherfucker. Again, that's not me cussing. That's LeBron James. So that's what LeBron James said. So I got to give full shout out to LeBron James for saying that awesome quote about one of my favorite Andre Iguodala. And my second shout out, this one you should be able to find. If you look up Dwayne Wade on Twitter, Brian, Dwayne Wade was doing a Q&A with some people on Twitter.
Oh, we showed this earlier, but let's show it again.
Oh, you showed the washed up
here,
one?
It's up again, yeah.
That's fantastic, because this is I didn't realize you said it, so that's great. But anyway, Dwayne Wade was asked by someone, why are you so washed up, man? And he said, because I like to smell good. Boom. Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, two of the greatest talkers all time. Love it. So those are our shout outs. And anyway, so that's the show. Brian didn't have anybody. I forgot you didn't have any shout outs. So anyway, that's the show. Thanks for watching.
Andrew Sutton, Above the Gods, Unmoved. Those are my shout outs.
There we go. All right, what I was going to say, if you found us not through the site, we are at boxscoregeeks.com. You can also find the show on Stitcher and iTunes, The Boxscore Geeks Show. Subscribe, upvote, it helps us out. We go live every week at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually Tuesday or Wednesday, but you have to follow myself, Nerd Numbers, Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian, or Patrick Minton, NBA Geek, to know when we are going live, because we got busy schedules, and you can watch the show live on twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. And if you missed the live show and want to see all of Brian's graphics, including the great Dwayne Wade tweet we just mentioned, you can watch the recap on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.